Then it is built in the Israeli language that we were made Ish and Isha. Man and woman, he created them. But I was telling you that I was started to tell you the true story of geometry. Well, to discover geometry, we have to accept a postulate. That's one day, possibly in Egypt, a mathematically gifted young man fell in contemplation. Those things happen sometimes. And he discovered the following. The cornea, that is the transparent outer face of our eye, is a little sphere, which is incrusted, so to speak, on a big sphere, which is the ocular globe. The intersection of two spheres is a circle. On this circle are anchored the little thread of the iris. And those threads are held together by an orbicular muscle. And when it contracts, it reduces the aperture of the iris. And when the radial fibers do contract, they increase the opening of the iris, so that we can increase the light coming in our eyes. When the light is dim and when the sun is very strong, we close the iris. We were in Egypt, and he remarked that the eye of his beloved was now reduced to a little point in the middle with radius going all around. If he had been a mechaniker, he would have invented the wheel. But he was a mathematician, and he discovered suddenly that the orbicular, making a tension of the radial fibers, all the points of the surface of the iris were at the closest strip from each other, which is the tensorial definition of the plane. Now, that is interesting because just looking as a lover, he got immediately the only definition of the plane, that's the surface at which all the points are the closest to each other that they can. Well, Euclid discovered in a blink, that would help, I suppose, a lot of schoolboys, just as they were told the true natural history of mathematics. Now, if we want to go deeper, how we discovered mathematics, we have to wait a few millenniaries, and then a philosopher, Descartes, suddenly had a fantastic vision that he has described. He was in Holland, in his poêle, that is a room with a nice fire, and suddenly he had a vision that you can procure yourself, and you will, like he did, discover the analytical geometry. Do that when you are at home. It's very easy and remarkable. You have to lay down in your bed with not too much light, and you have to be very relaxed. Now, with your two fingers, you will have make a pressure on your eyelids, not directly, but just by stretching them, so that you can modulate exactly the pressure. Suddenly, you will have impressions of light. That's called phosphine, and everybody has seen that. But if you do it very precisely, there would be a moment in which all your field of vision is filled up with tiny squares, alternatively red, purple, and dark goldish, gold and purple. And they are exactly put on the vertical of your body and the horizon of your two eyes. Exactly like a chessboard, extremely precise one. And that is very interesting, because what discovered Descartes was that he could define one point as by the number of columns and the number of lines you had to have to count in his chessboard to define one case of that chessboard. That's interesting to see that in order to press your eyes when you are a philosopher, you have to have some doubts. And then you press your eyes to see if you have well seen. And we know that Descartes was doubting. But we can go faster now and deeper. Well, if we come to the retina, which is inside this ocular globe, we will see that the cells which are on the temporal side send axons, let's say nerves, filaments, to the opposite part of the brain, and those who are from the nasal type, those who are on the temporal one goes directly, and those who are on the nasal one goes across. And that is very intriguing, because if you look at the separation between the two fields, you see a perfect meridian which makes the division. So that's the geology and the way of geography defining how you can put one place in a globe is already built in the geometry of our own retina, which is a sphere. But going deeper, we see the crisscross of the nasal part of the information, and then we have the first bijection ever found in the universe. And finally, if we follow the nerves going very deep inside the brain, they finish on the back of our head in the calcarine zone, which is the obscure center that sees. So that in fact we have a kind of television set. We use our lens, we use our sensitive surface, which is the retina, then we send by cable a special television program, and the screen is inside our head. You cannot see the screen, but the screen makes you seeing. That is the, let's say, the gross anatomy. But if we look at the very fine anatomy, once we are there in the calcarine system, then we will see that the cells are not randomly arranged, and their connection with the retina is extraordinarily precise, but they are reacting like, so to speak, isomorphic system. That is, representation is analyzed among very precise ways, and progressively we discover those columns, those lattices, and all the concepts that the modern algebra is now discovering. And the curious phenomenon for the biologist is that if we look back at this little trip that we did in our visual system, we will find first Euclidean geometry, the one of the lover. Then we will come to analytical geometry, the one of the Cartesian system. Then you come back to the modern geometry with all the complex algebras. And the curious phenomenon is that the steps in which mathematics has been discovered by human being has been made in exactly the same order, step by step, as the impulse of light in coming to our own body and being progressively analyzed when going deeper and deeper in the brain. It cannot be by chance that those two sequences of events are just the same. And then you have a first feeling of what I wanted to carry to you, that maybe the greatest discovery are just to try to understand partly how we have been made. That intelligence is built in not only on a theory nebulous about mind, but it is on the architecture, on the way all our system, nervous and all the rest, has been made. Now, I'm not going to give you a talk about the central nervous system. Also, it's exceedingly interesting. But to be short, we can say that every point of our bag of skin, as said Aristotle, is represented inside the brain. That explains now why Aristotle said you should not believe always your feelings, because sometimes they are wrong. They make mistake. And you know the story. He was at table with his disciple, and he was awaiting the next service, and he had made a little bowl of bread inside his finger. And he was rolling this little bowl on the table. Sometimes the philosopher have distractions like that. And he was really just filling this little bowl, and suddenly he had the idea of crossing the medius over the index. And suddenly he felt there were two bowls, and he could see that there was only one. Then he said, you should not believe your bag of skin, because maybe it tells you wrong. No. I'm sorry for Aristotle, but his bag of skin was correct and Aristotle was wrong. Because in our brain, all the skin is represented point by point. And if you were looking, I'll speak about that tomorrow, just a word tomorrow about it. If you were looking about the representation of our body, you would see all the body on the parietal ascendance, that is one of the parts of the body, like a person lying on a bed. But when you look at the place at which the hand is represented, you would find in its order the thumb, the index, the medius, and the other. Then, when you have a little ball which is running between your two fingers, it comes to the side of the index, which looks the little finger, or to the side of the medius, which looks the thumb. Now, when you cross it, cross the fingers, then now the ball comes to the part of the medius, which looks at the little finger, and to the part of the index, which looks at the thumb. Now, if you go back on your brain, which is not crossed, which is direct, now you would be sure that it's impossible that the same ball is fitting those two places, which are distant by the space of two fingers. So your brain tells you there are two balls, and your brain is right. Just Aristotle was wrong. You should not cross your fingers if you want to believe them.